Lisa Martinez first noticed the pattern while organizing rental records in the basement of Riverside Apartments on a rainy November afternoon in 1993. As the new property manager, she had inherited filing cabinets stuffed with 20 years of lease agreements, maintenance requests, and tenant complaint forms. What caught her attention was apartment 4B, a steady stream of move-in dates followed by abrupt move-out notices, never lasting more than 6 weeks, stretching back to the building's opening in 1974. Her predecessor, Harold Brennan, had managed the property for 2 decades before his sudden retirement the previous month. When Lisa asked about 4B during their brief transition meeting, Harold's weathered face had gone pale. He'd muttered something about difficult tenants and maintenance issues before changing the subject entirely. Now, sitting among dusty boxes of records, Lisa understood that Harold's vague explanations had been deliberate evasions. The apartment commanded premium rent due to its corner location on the 4th floor, offering panoramic views of the Platte River and downtown Denver's growing skyline. The unit featured hardwood floors, updated appliances, and enough space for a family of 4. By all accounts, it should have been their most desirable rental property. Instead, the records showed a revolving door of tenants who fled in the middle of the night, often abandoning security deposits and personal belongings in their haste to escape. Lisa's assistant property manager, James Chun, was a methodical young man pursuing his real estate license while working part-time for the management company. When Lisa shared her discovery about 4B's turnover rate, James suggested they examine the maintenance records more carefully. What they found was even more disturbing than the pattern of rapid departures. Every tenant had submitted identical maintenance requests within their first week of occupancy. Complaints about water running in the walls at night, despite the building's copper plumbing being only 20 years old. Reports of electrical problems, with lights flickering in patterns that resembled Morse code. Though multiple electricians had certified the wiring as perfect, most unsettling were the repeated requests to investigate voices in the vents and footsteps from the unit above, despite 4B being located on the top floor of the building. Harold's maintenance responses, documented in his careful handwriting, revealed a man growing increasingly desperate to explain the unexplainable. He had replaced the electrical system in 4B 3 times, upgraded the plumbing twice, and installed new HVAC equipment annually. Professional inspectors had examined every inch of the apartment, finding no structural problems, no code violations, and no logical explanation for the phenomena tenants consistently reported. The most chilling discovery came when Lisa found Harold's private journal wedged behind a filing cabinet, apparently forgotten during his hasty departure. The journal entries, dating from 1974 to 1993, chronicled his growing obsession with apartment 4B and his gradual realization that something fundamentally wrong existed within those walls. Harold's early entries described normal landlord frustrations, tenants who complained too much, minor maintenance issues, the usual challenges of property management. But by 1976, his tone had shifted to confusion and concern as the pattern of rapid tenant turnover became undeniable. By the early 1980s, his entries revealed a man haunted by experiences that challenged his rational worldview. One entry from March 1983 described Harold's decision to spend a night in 4B himself, hoping to debunk his tenants' claims and end the cycle of complaints. What he experienced during that single night changed everything. Harold wrote about awakening at 3:17 a.m. to the sound of running water, only to find all faucets turned off and the pipes completely dry. He described lights that flickered in deliberate sequences, spelling out words in an alphabet he couldn't identify. Most terrifying of all, He documented clear sounds of a family conversation coming from the apartment directly above the building's roof. James, reading over Lisa's shoulder as she examined Harold's journal, pointed out dates when the apartment had remained vacant for extended periods. These gaps coincided with Harold's most detailed entries about personal experiences in 4B. During one 6-month vacancy in 1987, Harold had conducted his own investigation, staying overnight multiple times and documenting phenomena that defied rational explanation. The journal revealed that Harold had discovered the apartment's construction history through city records and interviews with the original building contractors. The space that became 4B had been built over the foundation of a much older structure, a boarding house that had burned to the ground in 1952, killing 7 residents who had been trapped in their rooms by flames that spread with unnatural speed through the building's wooden frame. According to Harold's research, the 1952 fire had been attributed to faulty wiring, but witness accounts suggested something more sinister. Survivors described hearing screams from the upper floors long after the building had been completely engulfed, and several firefighters reported seeing figures in the windows of rooms that had already been destroyed by flames. The investigation had been cursory, concluded quickly, and the site had remained empty for over 20 years before Riverside Apartments was constructed. Lisa and James discovered that Harold had attempted to contact surviving relatives of the 1952 fire victims during the late 1980s. His correspondence, carefully filed but never sent, revealed his growing conviction that the 7 people who died in the boarding house fire remained somehow connected to the space their deaths had sanctified with tragedy. Harold believed that apartment 4B existed in a state of temporal overlap, where past and present coexisted in ways that tormented living occupants while keeping the dead trapped in their final moments. The unsent letters described Harold's theory that the apartment's phenomena intensified during times when new tenants tried to establish normal domestic routines, cooking meals, watching television, settling into bed for the night. These ordinary activities seemed to trigger responses from the boarding house residents, who continued their own routines in a parallel existence that occasionally bled through into the physical world. James suggested they interview former tenants to corroborate Harold's documented experiences. Lisa spent weeks tracking down people who had lived in 4B, finding them scattered across the country, many of whom had moved far from Denver immediately after breaking their leases. The interviews revealed remarkable consistency in their accounts, despite the fact that most had never communicated with each other about their experiences. Sarah Williams, who had rented 4B for 5 weeks in 1989, described awakening each night to the smell of smoke and the sound of people coughing, as if struggling to breathe through poisoned air. The sound would begin at exactly 2:43 a.m. and continue until dawn, growing more desperate and terrified as the hours passed. Sarah had initially attributed the experiences to anxiety about living alone for the first time. But when she mentioned the timing to her upstairs neighbor, she learned that 2:43 a.m. was precisely when a 1952 fire had been first reported to the Denver Fire Department. Michael Torres, a tenant from 1991, had documented his experiences with a portable cassette recorder, hoping to prove to his skeptical girlfriend that the apartment was genuinely haunted. His recordings, which he mailed to Lisa after their phone interview, captured voices pleading for help in the early morning hours, accompanied by sounds of breaking glass and collapsing timber. Most disturbing was a clear voice calling out, "Room 7, Room 7," repeatedly. The same room number that had been assigned to 4B's exact location in the original boarding house layout. Lisa and James realized that Harold's desperate maintenance efforts had been attempts to disrupt whatever conditions allowed the past to intrude upon the present. His repeated electrical and plumbing upgrades were not responses to actual defects, but rather efforts to alter the apartment's energy patterns and break the connection between 1952 and the current day. Armed with this understanding, Lisa made a decision that would define the remainder of her career in property management. Rather than continuing Harold's futile cycle of renovations and tenant turnover, she chose to take 4B permanently off the rental market. The apartment would remain furnished and maintained, but never again occupied by living tenants who could be traumatized by encounters with the past. James initially questioned the financial wisdom of removing their most potentially profitable unit from service. But as they spent more time researching the apartment's history, he came to understand that some spaces carry burdens too heavy for ordinary people to bear. The 7 people who had died in the 1952 fire deserved acknowledgement and respect, not the repeated intrusion of tenants who were unprepared for encounters with lingering tragedy. Lisa's decision to leave 4B vacant was not purely motivated by compassion for former fire victims. During her final night of investigation in the apartment, she had experienced phenomena that convinced her that some boundaries between past and present should not be crossed by the living. She had heard voices calling for help, felt temperature drops that left frost on the windows despite the October heat, and witnessed lights that flickered in patterns too deliberate to be random electrical fluctuations. The most compelling evidence came when Lisa discovered a hidden compartment behind the bathroom medicine cabinet, revealing personal items that had belonged to the 1952 boarding house residents. A child's wooden toy, a woman's wedding ring, a man's pocket watch stopped at 2:43, all preserved in perfect condition despite being exposed to fire and decades of weather before the apartment building's construction. James helped Lisa create a memorial wall in the building's lobby, featuring photographs and brief biographies of the 7 fire victims. The memorial served both as historical acknowledgement and as subtle explanation for 4B's permanent vacancy. Tenants in other units reported feeling more comfortable in the building once the memorial was installed, as if some restless energy had finally been given appropriate recognition. Over the following months, Lisa documented the gradual cessation of paranormal activity throughout the building. Other tenants stopped reporting unexplained sounds and temperature fluctuations that had been dismissed as normal building settling. The elevator stopped making unscheduled trips to the 4th floor during the early morning hours. Most significantly, the smoke detectors throughout the building stopped triggering false alarms at 2:43 a.m., a pattern that had persisted for 20 years but had been attributed to faulty equipment. Lisa's approach to 4B became a model for handling supernatural phenomena in rental properties. She maintained the apartment in perfect condition, changing the locks annually and ensuring that utilities remained active, but never again allowed human occupancy. The apartment existed as a preserved space, acknowledging the continuing presence of those who had died there while protecting the living from encounters they were not equipped to handle. James eventually completed his real estate license and started his own property management company, specializing in buildings with complicated histories. He and Lisa developed protocols for identifying properties that might carry similar burdens, helping other landlords understand when rental spaces required special consideration due to traumatic past events. Years later, Lisa would reflect on her time managing Riverside apartments as the period when she learned that some problems could not be solved through conventional means. The apartment that no one rented twice had taught her that acknowledging tragedy with respect and compassion was sometimes more important than generating revenue or maintaining occupancy rates. Today, apartment 4B remains vacant, its windows dark, but its interior maintained in perfect condition. The building continues to operate successfully with its remaining units fully occupied by long-term tenants who appreciate living in a place where management prioritizes human dignity over profit margins. Lisa has moved on to other properties, but she returns annually on the anniversary of the 1952 fire to ensure that 4B's memorial flowers are fresh and that the 7 people who died there continue to be remembered with the respect they deserve. The apartment that no one rents twice stands as a testament to the truth that some spaces hold memories too powerful to be erased by new construction or modern conveniences. Sometimes the most responsible choice is not to fix what is broken, but to acknowledge why it cannot be repaired, but to ensure that the living learn from the experiences of those who came before. This was another tale from the SDF Horror Vault. If you felt the chill tonight, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. New stories open soon. And remember, the vault is always waiting.